All right, guys, thank you. We are continuing with our Kill Rationalism series. Today's going to be slightly less intellectually taxing. I just got a lot going on in my personal life right now. I'm trying to film some of these before things happen so I can be somewhat consistent during the life changes. But today we're going to be talking about how to argue with rationalists and why. This is going to be fun. It's not going to be like my last video, What is Time? That was a little more intellectually taxing, but we are still going to have some fun with this video. And I think it is important because I want to empower and inspire you guys to take on the rationalists. They really have gone too far. It's been far too long letting them kind of ruin everything and then walk around after ruining everything like they're some genius, like they've got it all figured out because we have to follow what they say. No, you are limited, my friend, and I refuse. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Now, in this video, we're going to start off with why do we argue with rationalists? And just as a reminder, they are just as dogmatic, emotionally driven, and ironically irrational as the religious, which I am not, who they love to deride. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Okay, so why do we argue with rationalists? Because they're destroying our civilization and the human spirit. I say that without hyperbole, without pretense. They've completely destroyed the human spirit. They don't even believe the human spirit exists. They would tell you to put it on the table or show me visible, tangible proof of it, material proof of it. It's ridiculous. And if you want to hear more about why I believe they're destroying our civilization, please go watch my Rationality Built America, Rationalism Will Destroy It video in this series. If you haven't seen that, it's a pretty good one, I think. But they're destroying things. That's why we are killing rationalists, because simply put, they're running us off the cliff, and that's not good. Because they're sterilizing all irrational, meaningful, and mysterious elements of the world and human condition out of existence. They have exactly that. When you attain rational understanding or knowledge of it, you extract all meaning, because meaning derives mostly from irrational means, at least the meaning that sustains the soul and spirit. Because they are destroying art, mythology, and spiritual pursuits, which act as a salvation for the brutality we face on earth. And that brutality is compounded by the fact that we have no engagement with art, myth, or spiritual other side, if you will, that can allow us to face and bear the burdens and struggles that we live in. Now, in many ways, I think a lot of these rationalists are kind of privileged. They don't really know what it's like to have their country be torn apart by war, or to watch a group of invaders do unspeakable atrocities to their family member and tie them up and watch it. They don't know what it's like to not have plumbing. They don't know what it's like uh, to live in a truly bigoted society where there are laws on the book saying, hey, you can't drink at these water fountains, you can't do any of this stuff. And in many ways, they're quite privileged, and I think they've been able to cushion themselves from the brutal aspects of the world, and they've had a false sense of security. They've conflated their circumstance with the world, and they become so privileged where they think things just sort of appear magically out of thin air, and the only question left is how do we distribute everything and how do we just kind of do it. But they don't really understand, like, all this stuff is created and you're destroying all those prerequisites and aspects that are necessary to the creation of this functioning civilization. So stop doing that. Because they have devalued the human to the common chicken, all as the vegans remind us that we are no better, or perhaps even worse, than the common chicken. They've destroyed the great chain of being. That's kind of with my other points. They've destroyed the human spirit, and the idea that you could do these things and pretend they don't exist and not have that come back and bite you in a negative way, simply put, I disagree. And the reason why I disagree is not because it just theoretically feels like I should disagree. Because when I look out in history, when I look out in the world, I think, oh, okay, so this spiritual irrational stuff, this is probably a permanent aspect of the species. And when people don't do it, it might work for a select few, but on the whole, that's when you get problems. Hello, Oswald Spengler. And then most importantly, why do we argue with rationalists? Because we have no other choice. It is either that or allow them to drive us off the cliff. If allowed to continue, the rationalists will drive us off the cliff, not only tripping up deficient rationalism in the process, but deficient irrationalism and pre-rationalism. So that is to say, not only are we dealing with a deficient mental consciousness structure, we're also going to be tripping up deficient mythical and magical. Now we got real problems, especially when you take in the fact that the world as it exists today, with nuclear weapons, with bombs that can destroy entire peoples, entire countries, things could get very bad. And if we're going to drive off the cliff, we're going to get impaled by a bunch of rocks on the way down. it could get very, very awful. I need to impress upon you guys, civilization is not a given. It is not something that is granted. It is something that is created, and every civilization has been created off the back of bloodshed, of extreme violence. It is very brutal world out there, and we have to deal with. I'm glad we can have this world where I have a computer and I can talk to you and I can talk from the safety of my home. I want that more than anyone. Stop dividing all those things up. And if pure rationality will not provide you a functioning civilization, perhaps we should trade it off just a little bit, right? Perhaps we should, if it means I'm not going to watch my brother or mother or father get their head cut off by some warring tribe. It's ridiculous. And also, this is just a fun one. They're very smug and arrogant for the most part, and it's nice knocking them down a peg or two. Um, though this should be reserved for rationalists who are actually being smug. Most of them are, because we'll get to that later. But most of them are smug and arrogant, and it's sometimes, I can't lie, it just feels good knocking them down a peg. But you should reserve that for the ones that are being smug and arrogant. You can't presume that all rationalists are smug and arrogant. And it probably helps if they're displaying it in the moment. If they're being smug and being arrogant to someone else, then yeah, you need to knock them down a peg. Especially these egotistical little guys. Yeah, they got to go. But just keep that in mind. You don't want to be a dick or anything. Okay, so now we've covered why with rationalists. So let's get into how to argue with rationalists. So most importantly, you have to remember a few things going in. We all have psychological walls that we construct that act as our psychological foundation. And that foundation tethers us to a reality and allows us to not only survive, but thrive. So if you thrive, and I mean, thrive can be in a very qualitatively limited sense. It doesn't have to be, your Elon Musk with the billions and billions, or Bezos or something like that. Even if you just have a basic $25,000-$30,000 a year job, that's pretty good in the grand scheme of things. I know it sounds low, but in the world, it's pretty good. You have a psychological foundation. The world works this way, people act this way, the world started this way, the world will end this way, time is this, space is that. That's my mom, that's my dad, this is all. Okay, I have me, the sense of there's I exist, Justin, I exist. And you springboard off that to engage in the world. And you can, now that that's settled, you can survive. You're not going to kill yourself or just be killed because you're going to walk out into a highway or, I don't know, do something crazy. Or you could even thrive because now you know how the world works and you live it out every day and you get rewards on a daily basis. Great. You have to remember we're knocking their walls down. The rationalists have walls, and integral consciousness is also a wall. So don't think that if you've awakened integral consciousness or you've achieved irrationality, that you're somehow better than this. That is not true. You have walls too. It's just your walls are sturdier. So when you're knocking someone's walls down, you should expect emotional pushback. And if they do push back emotionally, that is not necessarily a flaw exclusive to rationalists. That's going to happen to me too if someone starts picking apart integral. That's going to happen to everyone. That happens to the religious and the mythical structure. And it can happen to the rationalists. It can happen to someone in between. Anyone. This is not a flaw exclusive to rationalists. When you knock someone's walls down, unless you're just trying to be a nihilistic jerk and you just want to ruin everything, you need to offer them something better. But we'll return to that. When they push back emotionally, it's a necessary self-defense. So keep that in mind. Don't take it personally. 2, expect that going in. And 3, don't look down on them for it because you'd be doing the same thing if you were in their shoes. Just as the walls go down, exactly that. Emotion's going to get bad. And of course, this is deficient emotion, deficient irrationality. So expect some pushback, expect some anger, expect some venom. All of a sudden, the rationalists who love logic might not be hyper consistent in the moment. Expects a little more irrationality from the rationalists. Now, this irrationality that I just spoke is compounded by wrath. If you follow my Seeing Through Gebser series, you'll recall that wrath was a consciousness awakening power because the magic and mythical structures, the unperspectable world, though they were pre-rational and irrational and they had a ton of problems, so did rationalists. They conferred psychic unity. That psychic unity was destroyed after the discovery of objectified space. I don't want to get too into it now. The point is, wrath was that force that allowed people to think rationally because the unity was broken. So they couldn't call upon or evoke aspects of the human condition that were the virtues of love, right? So grace, forgiveness, stuff like that. That's not going to work. We need something aggressive. We need something willful, and that is wrath. Wrath it is directionless fury, and then of course its counterpart is anger, which is directed fury. And so the irrationality and emotionally driven attacks will be charged with wrath. So we already have that problem because we're knocking down their walls. They will respond emotionally and irrationally. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but this will be compounded by wrath. Unfortunately, this means they will go below the belt and they will cross the line. It's better knowing this going in. If you want an example of this, you can look at the comments on my first Kill Rationalism video. Some of them, admittedly, were giving me arguments, and I tried to respond to those people because I do appreciate when people give me arguments. But the others were either just, one, they weren't really understanding my point. Then they springboarded off that to essentially just call me an idiot and a moron. Or two, they just took on this condescending tone of, we know better than you, and maybe you should take this as like, okay, just tell me where I went wrong or don't. I don't want to hear it. But just keep that in mind. The wrath will be there. They will go below the belt. They will cross the line. And you're going to see very quickly how these stoic rationalists don't have quite the amount of control that they thought they did. So if you don't have the temperament for this, it might be better just to hold back a little bit and just, okay, it's good that I like irrationality, but if I get to an argument and maybe I'm a sensitive person, that's not a bad thing. Some of you men could use a little sensitivity. That's why you get nothing done, because you think you can go in there and just try to big dick everyone, and you've got a little 3-incher. You're nothing. You're nothing. You're a 19-year-old who hasn't accomplished anything. You're not going to power over anyone. You need to finesse. You need to be tactful, deft. You need to be sensitive to the emotions and needs and wants of people. You need to balance these two. But nonetheless, if you do take things personally, if you're a little too overly sensitive, I've been there before. Just keep that in mind. Just maybe hang back a little bit. So another point is you're not irrational, but irrational. So remember the triangular thought pattern. It's either or, and then we invoke the third aspect, measuring thought, to formulate a directed judgment. Either or. So we have rationality. I want you to take a guess on what this or is. It's not irrationality. It's irrationality. Remember, they are not integral. They are not a rationalist. They are rationalists. They are the fish in the water. We are the fish, thank you to Jean Gebser, who has been taken out of the water. That means they simply cannot conceive of a rationality. They cannot conceive of a rationality. So, if you're not being rational, which you're not, you're being irrational, they will immediately put you into the camp of irrationality. Okay? You have to know this, and you have to fight against this. Don't ever let them tell you that you're being irrational when you're being irrational. Now, if you're being irrational for other reasons, maybe you're explaining the virtues of the mythical structure, that's fine. But just keep that in mind. A lot of conflation of irrationality with irrationality and vice versa. Very frustrating. Another point is dogma. So these people are just as dogmatic as the religious they like to deride. To them, you either adhere to the objective truth, or you're an irrational idiot who should not have the power to run anything, even your own life. You either adhere to what is objectively right and correct, or you're a moron and we should remove all power from you, and you should never be in charge of anything, and no one should take you seriously, and you should be bullied out of culture and society. Great. They're just as dogmatic because they believe everything is objective. Everything is objectively true. There is no subjectivity. There's no qualitative evaluation. Of course, they're kind of right about this, but also kind of wrong about this. They're right on this on one plane, but that one plane is limited. So if the domain is conducive towards it, then yeah, sure. But you have to. This is the origin of their arrogance. This objectivity or nothing. It's annoying. So this is to say, don't expect them to follow your ideas sight unseen. No matter how much they pay lip service to the idea of, oh, if you can prove me wrong, I'll change my mind. You hear them say that a lot. They will not. If you defeat them intellectually, and we're about to get into that, they are not going to take your mind immediately. It's going to take a few days or weeks or months, then they'll change. So all this crap about, hey, I'm illogical. If you can prove me wrong, I mean, logic is objectively true, then I'll follow. No, not. You might pay lip service to it. A lot of rationalism is paying lip service. They pay lip service to the other aspects of the human condition. They pay lip service to the pre-rational. They pay lip service to the irrational. They can't even conceive of the irrational. So don't let them get away with that. Don't let a rationalist who Monday through Saturday didn't even acknowledge irrationality, the emotional aspects, the pre-rational aspects of the human condition, and then on Sunday when you're at the bar debating, go, Oh yeah, rationality. Yeah, I mean, there's no rationality. I think about that all the time. No, because every time you make a political decision, every time you make a societal decision, every time you make an individual decision, every time you make a theological decision or a spiritual decision, it's always rationally bent. It's always one-sided. So why is it that you're being a rationalist all the time, but then you're paying lip service to me that you're not? I don't like that. I don't appreciate that. They simply will not immediately take your position. So just keep that in mind. You might have to uh, come back in another day or two, or next time you see them, or whatever, and just kind of play it by ear. If you think they're getting upset, then maybe pull back a little bit. Another thing to keep in mind. Let's see. Okay, so now we're in a new section. So we have to meet them where they are. We're presenting a rationality rationally. You can't go in there and appeal to other irrational aspects, or irrational or pre-rational, I should say, like emotion, instinct, or experience, beyond a limited extent. They are rationalists. They have discounted and dismissed those aspects as inferior. As I just said, they might pay lip service to them, but they don't take them seriously. I pay lip service to the idea that I don't know. I don't know. I'm not. I might pay lip service to the idea that when I watch Manchester City play and they lose, that I'm not going to watch them for the rest of the year because I'm angry. Every Saturday or Sunday, you see me on the screen. It doesn't matter what you say. What are you doing, right? So you have to meet them where they are and challenge them rationally. That is, in the world of ideas. You can't go in there and just talk about emotion, man, like the stoner. And that's actually getting into my next point. Don't go in there and start giving some hippy dippy bullshit, some third eye nonsense. All right. They will not appreciate that. They are rationalists. They have dismissed that. They will not even take it seriously. So if you go in there and you go, well, just open your third eye, man. Here, hit this DMT, man. You can open your chakras. It's great. Do not do that. Think about it. If you were a rationalist, maybe I change your mind. If I would have, if in my anti-rationalism video, whatever video you watched to first discover me, do you think you would still hang around if I went in there and said all that ridiculous hippy dippy stoner stuff? No, you would laugh me off the internet, and rightfully so, quite frankly. These hippies are morons. Oh, I hate hippies. Do not go in there and do that. They will dismiss you. They will see it as cringe. They're not entirely wrong, and they're just not going to take you seriously. They're going to look down at you. They're going to sneer you. As a matter of fact, you should be going out of your way to delineate yourself from cringe spiritual stuff. Make clear that there is a distinction between the 35-year-old privileged soccer mom who drinks Dunkin' every morning saying namaste, namaste to all her dumb coworkers who want her to jump off the Bay Bridge, and someone like Sri Aurobindo or Rudolf Steiner, who is just as intelligent as Heidegger, Nietzsche, all these guys. They're hyper intelligent. Jean Gebser, hyper intelligent, hyper erudite. Yet they take spirituality very seriously. There is a high form of spiritual engagement and a low form. Your job is to make clear that the low form is cringe, and you're not asking the rationalists to become that. You're asking them to become this. You are trying to make it clear that the intelligence, as this series is hopefully trying to point out, is not anathema to spiritual pursuits. It enables spiritual pursuits. Inferred intelligence allows us to understand things that are not immediately apparent, like spirituality. There you go. Let's see. So that is to say, you must defeat them intellectually by presenting a rationality rationally, which they will conflate either with rationality of some sort or some sort of irrationality. Uh, but once you get them out of their head and back into the world, then you can talk about mythic and magical stuff. But that's after you get them out here. Do not go in there and say, well, mythical, magical. Okay, we'll get there. You need to deconstruct what they're doing first. So that brings us up to the next point, defeating them intellectually. I'm not going to go into every single argument here because I would over overstuff this video, but you want to deconstruct their beliefs. Now, this is not a problem because they love doing that to everyone else. And they like to play the game because they don't live in the real world, the world of trade-off, scarcity, and externalization where people could die. So what they'll do is they'll come in, deconstruct your belief, and not offer anything better. And then you go, oh, okay, well, I'm just going to do my belief then. And they go, no, I've deconstructed it. And I'll say, well, you haven't offered anything better. And they go, I don't need to. If I show that your math equation doesn't work, I don't need to provide the correct one. What is happening here? They are lost in theory. in theory and in theory alone, that might be true. That may be true. We don't just live in theory alone. We live in the world out here. And we recognize that if we just deconstruct everything to the point where it melts down to nothing, this nihilism will infect our subconsciousness and our psyches in a way that will come back and destroy us, whether in terms of violence, tribal conflict, genocide. So again, these people are not living in the real world. They think if something is true in theory and in theory alone, therefore it'll be true in the world, and we should just sacrifice civilization to cater to their delusions of grandeur. No. But we will be deconstructing their beliefs. And if they're smug and arrogant, we're going to get some schadenfreude out of knocking this guy down because he's a jerk. But if, like most of the rationalists, if they're cool and normal and they're just regular people and they're not just these bitter, resentful losers, which most of them are not, they might be a little more receptive. And then you don't have to be a jerk about it, right? Because that would be wholly unconducive to your goals. That would be, I would not approve if you were needlessly mean or rude to a rationalist for no reason. You have to earn it. So we're going to attack the limited nature of rationality. Of course, we're going to point out the quantifiably measurable and consciously known, that it's limited to that, as opposed to, of course, the quantifiably measurable and consciously unknown, quantifiably immeasurable and consciously known, quantifiably immeasurable and consciously unknown, and qualitative valuations. Deducing a particular from a general, logic works best when it takes generals and premises that are generally agreed on and it deduces particulars, but struggles from inducing rather than deducing, building from a particular to a general. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it struggles. Its inability to understand time on its own terms, it spatializes it. It tries to spatialize an aspatial energy. You can explain this. Time is an intensity, not an extensity. Time. Rationality is not good for this. And it's destruction of meaning and purpose and value in conferring knowledge. You have extracted all meaning that could be delivered through irrational means. Terrible idea. Awful, awful, awful idea. Very bad. So always bring these things up. Bring up that it's limited and explain. Quantifiably measurable, consciously known. Explain the alternative. Explain the deficiencies of logic. Explain its limitation and its confinement to space and its inability to understand time. Also give examples of its impotence in any area or domain that belongs to the quantifiably immeasurable. So explain how rationality bastardizes mythology with their shallow, weak interpretations that are pathetic. Explain how that same shallowness manifests in interpretations of art. Art has become a math proof. First of all, art has become objective, and it can be objectively good or bad and subjectively good or bad at the same time. Instead of enjoying or appreciating or presupposing art in a way that works on the soul, where we're pulling from the soul and the sustenance of the soul, and we're talking about images and feelings and emotions that were created by engagement with the art, instead of doing any of that, is, oh, it set it off, and it set it up and it paid it off. Therefore, this is a good movie. So art, in all of its quantifiably immeasurable and mysterious and energetic and numinous aspects to it, have been reduced to the quantifiable, and in doing so, we've destroyed any sort of real engagement with art, and in turn, the art we get now sucks. And the soul. The rationalists are skeptical of the phenomenon in general. They don't believe the soul exists. You explain to them that they have been living the soul, if you will, their entire lives. They've just carved out the crust of it and called it the psyche. They just measured the crust of it, the absolute tip, which can be measured, the 0.3%, and they go, oh, it's the psyche. No, that's the very, you've been living in this, so just explain it to them very clearly. And if necessary, you can explain the connections between perspectivity and rationality, using the eye as an example of rationality's efficient and deficient nature. That's, of course, in my other video. You can say, look, just like the eye, yes, I can see more and can see clearly, and there's a lot of order here, but it is limited. Same thing. And if you explain that too, that'll be good, because subconsciously, when they hear you going off about that, they're going to be like, oh crap, this dude might know more about this than I do, and I'm going to be a little worried. Now, again, if they're smug and you have a feeling that they're never going to change because they're just dug in, then you just knock them down a peg. If you want, you can be nice about it. That's what I do. Some of you guys play this whole like, oh, you should never be mean in any circumstance ever. I disagree. But if they're cool, be cool. Another way to do this is just simply ask them why they should deploy rational thought in this domain of inquiry. whether it be of the human condition, whether it be of the world or the human condition, and press them for an answer. Ask them in spiritual pursuits. When I'm trying to understand when I'm trying to attain knowledge of the existence of God or a spiritual other side, why should I deploy rational thought? Just ask them and shut up. Just what? What? Why should I deploy rational thought in this domain of life? Why shouldn't you? And then you'll go, well, normally the burden of proof would be on you, but because I'm a good faith person, I don't think I should be rational right now, because in this domain of inquiry, we're talking about the quantifiably immeasurable, and rationality is confined to the quantifiably measurable and consciously known. So, knowing this and rendering these modes of thought transparent, I think it would be foolish to deploy a mode of thought that is impotent or inefficient in this domain of inquiry or life. What do you think? Watch steam start coming out of their ears. They have never even thought about it. Why have they never thought about it? They are the fish in water. We are the fish out of water. Thank you, Jean Gebser. You have taken us out of the water. Thank you. Simply ask them and shut up. They know how to think rationally. They don't know what rationality is. Ask them what it is, and all of a sudden you're going to start. It's like the King's Speech all of a sudden. So you might ask them that question, and maybe they'll say, maybe they're a little smarter, and they'll say, well, rationality brought us all these great results in this domain of life, this domain of life, this domain of life. So science, math. We'll get to that in a second, and that's true. We'll expand more on this in a little bit, but that is true. But what's happening here? They're pointing to domains of the world and the human condition that are quantifiably measurable and consciously known, and they're saying rationality yields good results in these domains. Yes, I agree. We would never argue against that. That's not arguing against rationalism. That's arguing against rationality on principle. And that would be foolish. And you should make clear to the rationalists, or else they're going to, again, they won't be able to conceive you as irrational, but only irrational. So yes, that is true. I completely agree when it comes to science, when it comes to math, when it comes to even just economics or just organizing society in a little more thoughtful way. I completely agree. These are all quantifiably measurable and consciously known. Yes. You then explain to them why it's deficient, in other areas of life. It's very simple. So now we're going to get to common responses. Quote, you're using rationality against rationality, which is a contradiction. So one, and obviously, if someone says this to you, they've completely missed the point. A contradiction is a product of a particular way of relating objects to each other. And if we can stand outside this mode of thought and determine it is impotent and should therefore not be deployed, then the fact that a contradiction is produced if you were to insist in proceeding with this mode of thought is meaningless. So it could be a contradiction when you decide to view it rationally, when you decide to relate objects to each other rationally. But if we have decided that it should not be, it should not be here, maybe we're reading myth or engaging with soul searching in some way, we're not going to use it. So whether it produces a contradiction or not, it is irrelevant. It is a moot point. That is cool and that's interesting, but it doesn't matter because we're not using it. And if we were using it, then yes, you would have a point. I would contradiction and we cannot go further. I agree, but we're not. So it doesn't matter if we're deploying pre-rational, irrational, or irrational thought, if you will. It doesn't matter if rational thought says there's a contradiction. We're not using it right now. Oh, if we use this hammer, it won't work in this little experiment we got here. Okay, that's why we're going to use the saw. Yeah, but if we use the hammer, you're using a hammer against the hammer. You're trying to use a hammer. No, we're using a saw. It just looks like a hammer. Two, that's number one. Two, this isn't even true. We're presenting a rationality rationally. Why? So we can meet you on your level. We cannot talk to you about systasis or syneretic perception or a wearing of truth or volition or spiritual enlightenment or anything like that because you're going to dismiss it offhand. So I'm not even going to try. So I'm going to meet you where you are and I'm going to intellectually defeat you because the mind and the world of ideas is for you the end all be all. So you're not going to take anything else seriously. And if I can beat you there, now I got you. Another common response is suddenly rationality cannot be defined. They'll ask you to define rationality or explain what it is. Now, this, in fairness, is not entirely absurd. If you're trying to deconstruct rationality, you should have an understanding of what these are, and that's what this video series is trying to help you. That's what my Jean Gebser series is trying to help you guys. It's trying to help render these modes of thought and these aspects of the human condition transparent so we can attain information knowledge of them, recognize efficient and deficient aspects of them, and deploy them healthily and fortuitously. So they ask you to define rationality, rationalism, and explain what it is. Now, since you've watched this video, you can do exactly that. And using the tools that Gebser and this series equip you with, and you can lay it out beautifully. You know exactly what rationality is. It is a particular way of relating objects to each other. And then you go. You know exactly what rationalism is. It is the idea that that which can be considered true by rational thought is exclusively true. And what else? You should know what irrationality is, to be without or stand beyond or above, so to speak, rationality. Irrationality, you should know what it is. Pre-rationality, the vital instincts, exactly that, vital instincts, forces, and drives that constitute us and create aspects of the human condition, how they operate. Irrational thought, this sort of circular, undivided thought that is against the rules of rational thought. You should know everything. And the beauty is hopefully you'll be able to lay it out beautifully and just sort of, okay, good question. Boom, 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 boom. Now, realizing that you know way more than they do and subconsciously worry that you're going to tear down their walls, they will either say that you're wrong without ever explaining how rationality actually operates, or they'll just ignore you entirely. So you explain what rationality is, you explain how it operates, you give examples in philosophy, you give examples of Einstein in reconciling energy as wave and corpuscle, not just wave. You give examples in all sorts of stuff. Maybe politics of rational with the 1, 2, 3 triangular thought, and you make it very clear. They'll say either two things. Either that's not what rationality is, and you say, okay, well, maybe me and Kant have it wrong. What do you think rationality is? They will never tell you. They will never tell you. They simply will not tell you. Or they'll just give you some ridiculous absurd that you could just pick apart, because you could say, oh, well, that doesn't correspond to anything in the world. So, or they'll tell you, or they'll just ignore you. They will ignore you entirely. Now, this is more common in internet discussions. I remember once I was arguing with a guy, and he asked me exactly, he was a rationalist midwit. And he goes, explain what it is, yada, yada. So I did. And I laid it out beautifully. I laid it out as concisely as I could. And you know what his response was to my little 200-300 word? And that was trying to be as concise as possible. Tweet was, what's rationality? Define rationality. So I just did. I just did. The tweet you're responding to is what I did. I broke it down very clearly. He just ignored it and just said, define it again. Or don't even, just define it, as if I didn't do it the first time. What is happening is that though they are unfamiliar with the connections between the vanishing point and perspectivity and the axioms of rational thought, I covered this in my Kill Rationalism, the fascinating connections between perspectivity and rationality, because they are ignorant of the importance of the vanishing point, they subconsciously kind of realize this. They realize that my vanishing point is very strong because I just broke down your mode of thought very clearly, and their vanishing point now has become weakened. So they know if they can hide behind definitions, and I'm going to make another point, but if they can hide behind definitions, I will not be able to confer order, clarity, or unity on what comes after those definitions. They know that if they accept my explanation of rationality, that's going to be a problem, because now I'm going to deconstruct it, because I just confidently asserted what it is. And now they're like, yeah, you're right. So now I'm going to have a problem because clearly this guy's been taken out of the water and I have not. So they will hide behind definitions. And you see this manifest in other ways. You see this manifest in politics a lot. Woke has been a big vanishing point. I remember the woke originally meant to be awakened to biases and injustices entrenched in the systems of our country. It then was sort of repurposed and repackaged into woke, as in awakened to class consciousness or Marxist analysis, some sort of far left ideological worldview. That was, of course, the woke left, but now the James Lindsay's of the world are trying to get the woke right underneath, trying to get that going. So when the woke left happened, everyone kind of accepted it. But then after a while, they said, well, you guys can't even give me a definition of woke left. You can't even define woke. So that's what they're doing, right? They're trying to hide because they know if you can't even define woke, then all of your criticisms are going to be useless. So they just hide. So you give a million definitions, each one more accurate than the last, and they will just go, no, that's not it. That's not it. That's not it. Oh, okay. Well, maybe I'm a moron. Can you explain to me what the definition is? No. This is how you know you're not dealing with someone honest. This is how you know you're not dealing with someone honest. If they will not be very clear about the definitions of the word they're using, they are not being honest. Do not bother with them. And you see it with the woke right. The woke right, unfortunately, I don't even like calling them that. We'll call them the a liberal right, not a liberal as in a proponent of liberalism, but a liberal as in to be without liberal, or to be pre-liberal as I like to call them. They also are playing this game because now James Lindsay is calling them woke right, and they don't like that because that associates them with their enemy, the woke left, and that's going to be not politically effective for them. So they hide behind the definition, and they go, "You can't draw any common through line between any of us." I can, by the way. You're all a liberal. That is the one common through line, you morons. But that's what they do. And as a quick incidental rant, some of you guys, unfortunately, the post-liberal right side, they have this aesthetic of being super like kind of rationalist, honestly, like really intelligent and really just cutting through all the bull crap. And we got the real intellectual dark web. But yeah, go stick with your high school curriculum. Why don't you come over here? We'll teach you about all these edgy guys that your teachers don't want you to read and listen to. And then you listen to their analysis, and it's either just unironically far left advocates because they're arguing against liberalism. So now they're just taking far left arguments, communist arguments against liberalism, and they're just arguing, and they can't see the connection there. Or they're just quibbling over semantics. Oh, that's not woke right. That is woke right. That's not woke right. That's woke right. That's not real right. That's real right. That's elite right. That's populist right. That's it. It's nothing. There's nothing there. So the axiom is very important. The vanishing point is very important. I'm sorry for that incidental run. These guys just piss me off. Okay, let's see. So be clear in your definitions. I already said that. Okay, now we're wrapping up here. So finally, you're going to want to throw them a bone. And you should be willing to do this because one, you should be trying to be honest. As much as I like to talk about knocking him down a peg, that's only for rationalists with a rotten soul. If you have a rationalist, which I'm willing to grant a majority of them are, as normal people, and they're well-intentioned, good faith people, you should not be being smug to them. You should not be being a jerk to them and pointing and laughing, oh, look how stupid you are. Look how morally and intellectually superior I am. That is not what this is. So when you throw them a bone, it should be honest. You should be willing to throw them a bone. So what that means is concede the efficient uses of rationality. Why wouldn't you want to do this? We're integral, so we're not going to do like the people I just ranted about and childishly and in a very adolescent and emotional manner just reject not rationalism, but rationality on principle, efficient rationality. No, we're not doing that. So why in the world, if I'm rejecting the deficient rationalism, why would I then go on to reject efficient rationality, excuse me? That would make no sense. Can't do that. You cannot do that. Throw them a bone. When they say, hey, we were able to create wealth, which acts as a foundation for moral improvement, and that is true. You will not see moral debates about Kant and utilitarians and deontologists and all that. You will not see that in Timbuktu, where they have warring and civil wars and conflicts, maybe in Africa, maybe in the Middle East. You don't see that stuff. We see that in America and in the West because we have the time and the resources that allow us to do that. We're not viewing people as enemies because, yeah, he might be a little richer than me, but at least he didn't kill my son to steal the last piece of steak from me. No one cares. The second all of our wealth collapses, you will watch as all your grand little theories about moral ethics and all this stuff gets completely cut down, and we return to our primitive, deficient, magical nature, where we are killing, we are tossing out any sort of moral consistency, any moral systems, also we can feed our children, and you should understand this. Concede when they say rationality helped us escape that circumstance I described in the form of economics, capitalism. I love capitalism, by the way. All you planned economists, I would love to argue. And by the way, I will never take credit for our current economy. That's a mixed economy. That's not what I advocate. So like economics, we have, of course, advancements in medicine, vaccines, scientific advancements. I have a pregnant girlfriend. We go through all the sonars and all the weird stuff. It's beautiful. It's amazing. All the medicines. It's obviously expanded life, uh, the lifespan of human beings. Healthier foods. I know we don't really see it now because everything's fast food, but in theory, you can kind of find healthier foods, if only because we found scientific ways of ridding all the diseases and all that stuff. Ordering society, individual rights, a justice system. This is all produced by rationality, and that is not a bad thing. You should never be. It's okay to argue against a corrupted. Let's take the justice system. I'm not saying you can never criticize the justice system. The justice system, in my opinion, in many ways, is corrupted right now. So, and if I see an example of that corruption, I'm not going to defend that. But I'm also not going to go so far as to say we shouldn't have a justice system in principle in entirety, because that would be wholly foolish. That would be deficient of rationality. So, when they hit a point about efficient rationality, consensual governance is another one. We can vote and we can participate rather than just have some king dictate our lives. Just concede it. Why not? Meet them where they are. That you will appear far more reasonable and they will be more conducive towards coming to your side. All right, and finally, you have to make clear to them that there is something superior to rationality and rationalism. That is integral consciousness and irrationality. You are knocking down their walls, but you are building sturdier ones in the process. That's what I was talking about earlier. When you knock down someone's walls, unless you're just some sinister jerk, you want to rebuild something better. We're not here to destroy society and destroy civilization and just get a rise out of making or just being cruel to people. Why would you do that? So show them the benefits of irrationality. Show them the benefits of integral consciousness, of taking all aspects of the human condition, balancing them and integrating them into something more than the sum of its parts. So you can now consciously move through all aspects of these human conditions. You can consciously move through the intensity that is time. Hello to my last video. And simply put, this will enrich your life in so many ways, whether it's be rational decisions guided by uh, time as an intensity, which in turn is more conducive towards success or beneficial results, whether it be concretizing the soul, doing some soul work, and finally getting over some problems, some traumas, finally letting go of that anger, whether it be having a connection to the spiritual and having that connection empower you in life, empower you to be brave, to be courageous, to not fear death. Uh, Even irrationality, whether in the form of the 2D flat circle and life and death and life, that could also be empowering, or art, or mythology, or symbolism. These are life enriching, soul enriching, poetry. Make it clear that they're all you're advocating for is to keep rationality in its place and include it with everything I just mentioned. So as a rational person, they're probably going to hear that and eventually they're going to go, I hate to admit I was wrong, but I think that guy's right. So this was a little longer than I thought it was going to be, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments your worst arguments with a rationalist. I'm very curious because they can be very frustrating. Don't ever let these people say that they are inherently more honorable or honest or ingenuous. They're just not. They're just not. It's ego. It's delusion. It's very frustrating. I love you guys more than anything. I have a lot of big life changes coming up. So if you are a spiritual person, I would appreciate your prayers. Thank you guys. I love you so much, and I will see you soon. Thank you guys.